slow up, no I don't take shit. I got no love for the fakeness. If you wanna play tough and wanna hate this, I'll always show up. I don't ever slow up.
The chilling new horror film of 2024, Never Let Go. Two children have grown up isolated deep in a forest, their mother instilling in them a single, chilling truth: the outside world has been overrun by monsters. The only safe haven is their small cabin, carved with ancient runes by their ancestors. Whenever the children venture out to gather supplies, they must tie themselves to the house with a rope, keeping one end securely fastened inside. This way, they always remain under the cabin's protection. Their mother has only one rule: no matter what happens, never untie the rope. At first, the children obeyed without question. However, this outing went awry. The rope's limited length forced them to hunt close to the cabin, depleting the local resources. After hours of searching, Nolan spotted a bird egg just beyond his reach. Excited, he moved toward it, only to find the rope at its limit. Nolan was so anxious that he intended to untie the rope directly, despite his mother's rules. Luckily, his brother Samuel happened to come by and saw the scene and immediately stopped Nolan. Nolan said that he only needed to loosen the rope for a few seconds, and then he could get the bird's egg. Samuel suggested marking the spot and asking their mother to extend the rope instead. Reluctantly, Nolan agreed, but his irritation simmered beneath the surface. Later, in an attempt to prank Samuel, Nolan stepped on his brother's rope. The mischief turned disastrous when Samuel slipped, tumbling down a slope and severely injuring his ankle. Panicked, Nolan blew his whistle to call for help. Their mother rushed toward the sound, but an eerie hissing noise emerged from the woods. Desperate, Nolan unfastened his rope and scrambled down to help Samuel, but they didn't notice the lizard-like creature stalking closer. Their mother arrived, only to find her own rope stretched to its limit. Faced with no choice, she cut the rope, sprinted to her children, and dragged them back to safety just as the creature lunged. She quickly retied their ropes, narrowly escaping the attack. However, brave Nolan saw nothing as he stared at his anxious, seemingly paranoid mother. A seed of doubt about her warnings was planted in his mind. Back at the cabin, their mother forced the children onto the rune-covered floor, making them place their hands on the sacred carvings. Though puzzled, the children complied. Not only that, but each had to go to a storage compartment under the floor for a while. As if recognizing their confusion, the mother explained at dinner that not only could the monster take on any form, but it could even possess a human body and control the host. In that case, they would be able to infiltrate the house, and it was only prudent to let them prove themselves. And the storage compartment has the divine power to destroy the monster. Despite her explanation, Nolan's skepticism grew. That night, he asked Samuel if he'd seen anything unusual during the earlier incident. Samuel brushed it off, saying they were simply lucky to escape the monster. But Nolan countered, if monsters truly lurked everywhere, why didn't the family dog have to wear a rope? The unanswered question festered, pushing Nolan to uncover the truth himself. One night, Nolan's sleepwalking startled his mother, who found him standing silently in the hallway. Thankfully, she guided him back to bed before he could wander outside. It turns out that Nolan suffers from sleepwalking, and the unexpected circumstances of the day caused him to forget to tie the bells to his feet, so he was caught in time before he could get out of the house. As food supplies dwindled, their mother decided to hunt alone, leaving the injured Samuel and Nolan behind. Tying 3 ropes together, she expanded her search radius, but during her hunt, she saw a crow pecking at a bloodied corpse. For a split second, the mangled figure turned its head. It was Nolan. She blinked, and the vision vanished. Shaken, she aimed her crossbow but missed, startling the crow away. Frightened by her hallucinations, the mother knew her paranoia had likely spiraled into a psychological issue. With her hunt proving fruitless, she had no choice but to scrape bark from trees, frying it until crispy and dipping it in seasoning to stave off hunger. However, the meager portions could barely fill their stomachs, since Samuel's injury prevented him from venturing far. Nolan reluctantly joined his family in gathering tree bark for sustenance. Suddenly, Nolan thought he saw a figure dart past. When he turned, his mother and brother were gone. Worse, he noticed a bell tied to his ankle, usually reserved for sleepwalking nights. Before he could process what was happening, he woke up. It was another dream. Yet this time, the nightmare revealed a horrifying reality. He wasn't tied to a rope at all. Nolan immediately looked around in panic at the dark, shadowy woods, but after observing for a long time, there seemed to be nothing unusual. Then, in the next moment, His mother rushed forward and pulled him back. Samuel was suddenly woken by a chanting sound and realized that his brother had been sleepwalking outside. Soon, Nolan was thrown into a cage, the cold air making him instinctively cry out, but his mother ignored him, only unlocking the wooden slats after some time had passed. By then, Nolan had already wet his pants from holding it in. At that moment, Nolan felt humiliated, and his resentment toward his mother began to grow. His mother knew she had gone too far. She went inside, retrieved her long-kept camera, and explained its principles and usage to the brothers. She told them it was a product from before the world's end, and that the remaining photo paper could still take one last picture. She wanted to give them this opportunity. The brothers were immediately intrigued by this new and unfamiliar object, and Nolan quickly forgot his resentment toward his mother. But soon, her next words ignited his fury. She revealed that she hadn't hunted anything in a long time. The remaining food barely sufficed for their own needs, let alone their pet. So she planned to kill the dog. Not only would this provide food, but it would also reduce consumption, making it the last contribution the dog could make to the family. Nolan was enraged and immediately argued with her. His mother, undeterred, suggested they hold a vote on the matter. To Nolan's despair, his brothers sided with their mother. With no power to stop her, Nolan could only helplessly watch as she dragged the dog into the storage room. But just as she prepared to act, Nolan appeared from behind, holding a machete. He had long suspected his mother's mental state was deteriorating, and now he was determined to force her to face the truth. With one swift strike, he cut the rope and slammed the door shut, locking her inside. His mother pleaded for him to open the door, but Nolan remained unmoved. She quickly became frantic, smashing the window, and Samuel rushed over, knocking Nolan to the ground. The two brothers immediately began struggling. In the chaos, his mother grabbed a chair and smashed the glass, preparing to climb through, but suddenly, a strange voice called from behind her. Turning around, she saw the monster, which had somehow appeared out of nowhere. It declared that it would possess her, making her kill her own children. Desperate and terrified, she chose to take her own life rather than allow this fate to unfold. As she collapsed in a pool of blood, Samuel stopped struggling and hurried to open the door. Although there were no signs of any monsters inside the house, Nolan still felt guilty for causing his mother's death. He picked up the rope and tied it around himself. With their mother gone, the two brothers struggled even more to survive. Seeing his hungry brother, Nolan decided to take on the hunting task. He, too, learned from his mother, tying 3 ropes together, but even with the expanded range, he found little food. However, he did venture far enough to leave the forest for the first time, realizing that the ropes had reached their limit. Looking at the smooth, man-made road in the distance, Nolan felt certain it was constructed by human hands. He immediately called out for help, but after shouting for a long time, there was no response. Disappointed, he started to head back to the cabin. However, just then, a man appeared in the distance. The man was a passerby, a tourist who had heard Nolan's calls for help and came to see if anyone needed assistance. Nolan hesitated. A part of him sensed that the outside world might not be as his mother had described, but years of indoctrination made him hesitant to believe it. The man said he had food in his backpack and his car was parked on the road outside the forest, ready to take the brothers away. Just then, Samuel emerged with a crossbow. He immediately assumed the man was a monster come to deceive them. The man quickly reassured them that he meant no harm, and if they didn't want to be disturbed, he would leave. He started to turn away, intending to leave, but the next moment, Samuel shot the man with an arrow, piercing him. The man struggled to cover his wound and tried to flee. Nolan immediately chased after him, and soon found the man, gravely wounded. The man was clutching a phone Nolan had never seen before. The operator's voice came from the phone, asking if he needed help. Though Nolan was curious about the device, he seized the man's backpack. Finally, the brothers had food again. Nolan devoured the canned food greedily, while Samuel refused to eat, convinced that the food must be tainted with evil. But later that night, hunger got the better of Samuel, and he reluctantly ate. To his surprise, nothing happened, and he began to doubt the things his mother had told them. A photo in the man's wallet of his daughter further stirred his inner conflict, and Samuel also noticed the flashlight, which was a different type of light source from the candles they had. Just as he was pondering this, he heard a noise from the storage room. Samuel quickly went to investigate, but the room was empty. Suddenly, he heard a voice behind him, and a girl appeared, claiming she was looking for her father. Seeing the girl's resemblance to the one in the photo, Samuel realized his mother had been lying. He quickly denied knowing but the girl found the rope around his body strange, and she noticed the flashlight. which was his father's. Samuel tried to explain, but as the light went out, the girl saw their mother's body in the storage room and fled into the forest in fear. Samuel instinctively chased after her, knowing that even if there were no monsters, the wild animals in the forest were dangerous. The two saw a chase and escape, playing hide-and-seek in the forest. Not for a while. The length of the rope will reach the limit. No longer believe that Samuel saw the situation, finally unlocked the rope. But not long after the chase found that the girl was no trace. Not far from him, he saw something climbing a tree, a creature with 6 hands. He looked up in horror, but in the next moment, the monster's tongue shot out, slipping inside Samuel's clothes and slowly making its way into his mouth, taking control of him completely. Meanwhile, Nolan, who had been asleep, woke up with a start. He found his brother was missing. He quickly tied the rope and went outside, but all he could see was the rope extending into the forest. Desperately, he began pulling it back, but when it was all back in, there was no sign of Samuel. He grabbed the flashlight and ventured into the woods to search for him, only to hear his brother calling from a distance. Nolan rushed toward the voice, but when he arrived, there was no one there. Feeling something was wrong, he ran back to the cabin, hoping nothing had happened. Entering the cabin, he found Samuel sitting motionlessly on the bed. Nolan remembered his mother's warning about possession and immediately grabbed his brother's hand, muttering a prayer, but in the next moment, Samuel pulled out a machete and swung it at him. Nolan realized his mother hadn't been lying, the monsters were real. He ran to the bathroom and locked himself in, but Samuel used the bed to block the door, setting the house on fire. With no other option, Nolan climbed out the window, but the height made him hesitant to jump. Samuel watched with a sinister smile as Nolan climbed back into the house. When Nolan reappeared from the other side, Samuel didn't intervene. Instead, he pulled out the camera and prepared to take one final photo of this unforgettable moment. It was then that Nolan realized his mother had appeared, blocking his escape. He knew she was now the monster, and without hesitation, he ran downstairs to open the storage compartment. By the time his mother caught up, Nolan was already gone. He appeared behind her, shoved her into the compartment, and quickly pulled the rope to close it, in which the mother immediately screamed in agony. Not a moment later, and the non-stop struggling completely revealed his original form. Seeing himself to hold on, the possessed mother actually stopped struggling and allowed the divine power to completely ash herself. Soon, the fire in the forest attracted rescue teams. Whether by luck or divine protection, Nolan survived the blaze. He quickly informed the rescuers that there was still one more person in the forest, and they immediately assured him they would take care of it. It turned out they had also found the unconscious Samuel and were taking him on the plane. Relieved, Nolan looked toward the bustling city in the distance, filled with hope for a better future. But Nolan didn't know that in the final photo taken by the camera, his brother's shoulder was being gripped by a monstrous hand, and the creature now in the form of their mother was still in the house. At that moment, Samuel gave an eerie, malicious smile.